to Crime and Court. My name is Heather, and this is another episode in my Wrongful Conviction Series, Innocence Lost. And today we're going to be talking about Brandon Moon. So up really quickly, I'm going to play a clip for you, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper and talk about his story. So before we dive in, please hit that like button, subscribe, do the YouTube things, make sure that the notification bell is on. All right, so this is a series that I do weekly. I have a new individual every week that I highlight for a wrongful conviction. And this week it is Brandon Moon, and we are going to, like I said, watch this clip. Oh, hold on. I'm going to unmute you guys so you can hear it.
Moon, a man wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. In April 1987, a woman was assaulted in El Paso, Texas. Brandon was identified as the assailant, leading to his conviction and a 75-year sentence. In the late 80s, Brandon requested DNA testing, which was granted. The results excluded him as the perpetrator, and further testing in the mid-90s yielded similar results. In 2002, more advanced DNA testing revealed two male profiles that didn't match Brandon's. One was identified in 2004 as the victim's ex-husband, the other remained unknown. This led to Brandon's release in December 2004, and his official exoneration in 2005. Brandon Moon, a man wrongfully...
Alright, so get a little sneak peek of what we're going to talk about. So here's Brandon Moon. Image of him. Alright, so Brandon Moon was convicted by jury of 3 counts of aggravated SA. His 1988 conviction arose from an April 1987 incident in El Paso, Texas. Moon spent 17 years in prison before post-conviction DNA testing proved his innocence. 17 years. On the morning of April 27, 1987, an El Paso woman was assaulted in her home. A man in a stocking mask and bearing a gun forced her into a bedroom. He forced her onto the bed and threatened to end her life. Though he said he was only going to rob her, the assailant fondled and arred her before fleeing. The victim put on her son's robe and drove to a local store where she asked the staff to contact the police. She was taken to the hospital where an R kit was collected. But remember, this is 1987, so they knew enough to collect biological evidence. They just didn't know what to do with it at that point, really. All right, so she was taken to the hospital and they collected the R kit. The examining physician observed biological material on slides prepared from her swabs or her samples they took. All right, so on the day after the attack, the victim went to the police station and helped police create a composite sketch. The next day, she viewed a photographic array that included Moon's picture. So she was given a photo lineup. She indicated that Moon looked like the perpetrator, but that she couldn't be sure. Police obtained a warrant and arrested Moon on May 1st, 1987. Because she says it might be this guy, like he looks like the guy. People's memories are so fuzzy when it comes to like all that stuff, especially when you're in a traumatic situation, unless you like make a conscious effort to remember things. But most people don't, and they freeze, and they don't know what to do in these situations. So they don't necessarily have the best memory when it comes to a composite sketch of somebody, or even a photographic lineup, being able to identify someone. If I walked down the street right now and some guy passed me and I was like jamming to my music and, you know, playing or walking my dog and not paying attention, like I would never be able to identify him later. You know what I'm saying? So your memory is, it's only as good as you let it be. I mean, it can't be that great to begin with, because every time you remember something, you're remembering the memory of it. So each time it's a little more faded away from the original event. Anyways, so on May 2nd, photo lineup, Moon was the only person in both the photographic and live lineup procedures. 2 other women were contacted by the police to make an identification. These women had also been attacked by a man the police now believe to be Moon. In a similar fashion, they both identified Moon, which makes me believe that there is some law enforcement bias that is at play when it comes to choosing the IDing someone. I really think that we know it's not Moon, so how did all 3 women identify him correctly, or incorrectly? All right, so Moon's trial began in December 1987. The victim testified that she was able to remember the structure of the assailant's face, his physique, body size, nose, complexion, and hands. She could not, however, tell police if he had a mustache or the color of his eyes due to the darkness of the hallway where she was accosted and the short amount of time she had to view her assailant. The prosecution also relied on the testimony of the Texas Department of Public Safety serologist who tested the archet and bedding taken from the scene of the crime. The serologist identified that he tested the items and compared the results to samples taken from Moon, the victim's husband, and the victim's son. His results indicated that Moon was a possible contributor of the sample recovered from the evidence, but that the victim's husband and son were excluded. He tested that the sample was deposited by a non-secretor, which we don't even use that anymore, secretor, non-secretor, but one whose BLOOD type antigens are not found in other body fluids, and that the husband and son were both secretors. Moon is a non-secretor, so they said it was a non-secretor, and it wasn't these other people, so it obviously is Moon. Okay. That doesn't make sense, but sure. The defense claimed that Moon was misidentified. They also presented evidence that Moon was excluded as a source of all of the hairs recovered. So Moon, any hairs that they recovered at the scene, they said Moon's hair did not match. Moon testified that he was on campus of his college at the time of the crime. Moon's girlfriend testified that she had phoned him less than an hour before the crime occurred and had met him shortly after 9:15 p.m. The crime occurred at about 9 a.m. 9:15 a.m. a.m. Further, the defense argued that Moon had no car and could not have had the opportunity to commit the crime. So the prosecution was allowed to introduce the testimony of one of the other victims that had identified or misidentified Moon as her assailant. Both crimes, according to the prosecution, were similar enough and distinctive enough to point to the same perpetrator. The jury convicted Moon, and he was sentenced to 75 years in prison. 75 years in prison. And he was, in college? So he's 20-something? That's your whole life, buddy. Still your whole life ahead of you in prison. After his conviction, Moon continued to proclaim his innocence and began filing motions to have the evidence tested. In 1989, Moon won access to the evidence for DNA testing. I don't know why it says won. Like, how did he win something? He won the access to it. The 1990 results excluded him as a contributor of the sample on the bedspread. Using RFLP-based DNA testing, the laboratory was only able to get results from this one sample. Though he was excluded, the profile obtained was never compared against those of the victim or her husband and son. Moon petitioned the courts to allow more testing on the sample using better technology and asked for the profile to be compared to the victim. The court denied his motion, citing the laboratory's inability to determine if any male DNA was found. What? You guys put this guy away in prison and you can't do a little test to see if you made sure you got the right one? I mean, come on. I don't know. Further testing. It's like these prosecutors and law enforcement, they just don't want to be wrong about what the person, their perp that they chose, whoever that might be. They just don't want to be wrong about it, even if no evidence points to the person that they're alleging did the crimes. So Moon petitioned the courts to allow more testing on the sample. The court denied his motion, citing the laboratory's inability. All right, so further testing was conducted by the Texas Department of Public Safety in 1996, though Moon did not learn of the results until 2004. These results were similarly limited because reference samples were never submitted despite the laboratory's request for these samples. So a reference sample like from the victim, is that, I'm assuming, victim sampling, and I don't know. All right, so these results didn't happen. After Texas passed its post-conviction DNA testing statute in 2001, Moon filed for further testing. So how many times? Yeah, like this poor guy sitting in prison and he's just sitting there watching and paying attention, thank goodness, to the advances in DNA technology. And he, every time he saw something, he petitioned the court for something, which is awesome on his end. Like, good on him to not give up, to try to get out of prison. I mean, you can't give up. All right, so Moon filed for further testing. The El Paso public defender was appointed to represent him. Moon won access to the evidence for more testing, and the evidence was sent to a DPS lab in El Paso in October of 2002. STR-based DNA testing was conducted. The results excluded Moon as the contributor of the sample in all of the samples that were taken. The laboratory found that 2 male profiles were obtained, one on the comforter on which the incident took place and one on the bathrobe. Both samples contained a mixture of the victim's DNA and that of an unknown male. Further review of the results in 2004 confirmed that the victim's son was also excluded as a contributor to the samples. So they were waiting for like samples from people like the son and the dad, the husband. In November 2004, the victim's ex-husband was located and consented to having a profile compared to the profiles found by DPS. Testing confirmed that he was the contributor of the sample on the comforter. That left the unknown male profile on the robe, a profile from spermatozoa that could not have been left by Brandon Moon. The results of DNA testing not only demonstrate Moon's innocence, they point to serious flaws in the test results from trial, as DNA testing confirms that the comforter stain originated from the victim and her then husband. It is disturbing that the serologist at trial claimed the husband was definitively excluded as the source. If no BLOD type antigens were detected from the sample, while at the same time the victim herself was determined to be a secretor, no conclusions should have been made from the testing, certainly not that the semen had come from a non-secretor, especially since the victim is a non-secretor. All right, so in December 2004, Brandon Moon or Brandon, I keep saying Brendan because Brendan Dassey, Brandon Moon was freed from prison after post-conviction DNA testing proved his innocence. He was officially exonerated in 2005. He served 17 years in Texas for 3 counts of aggravated SA. His sentence was 75 years. Incident date was April of 1987. He was convicted in 88 and exonerated in 2005. He pled not guilty. What caused his conviction? Eyewitness misidentification was one. Unvalidated or improper forensic science was the other, because they weren't even properly testing. I mean, we didn't have the knowledge that we have now, but knowing now, we can retroactively look back and say, yeah, well, we didn't do it right, but there's nothing you can change it at this point. It is what it is. This poor guy went to prison for 17 years. The actual perpetrator, who we know now is the ex-husband, what a thing to do to your ex-wife. Just break in and assault them. Anyways, so that is Brandon Moon's story, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And be sure to hit that like button, subscribe so that you don't miss more episodes of Innocence Lost. I try to do a new episode every week on a different, separate individual each week. So just a little highlight for some of the lesser known victims in our criminal justice system. These individuals are victims, and it is unfortunate that there really is no retaliation or accountability that can be had when people are put away for the wrong reasons, or wrongfully convicted. There aren't very many measures for someone who goes to prison on bogus charges. There really aren't. I mean, good lawyers, good PR. It's the best way. You got to go, like in the Karen Reed case. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.